10, 9, ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff.
Welcome to the Alien Probe Podcast. During the summer of 1947, a bizarre and inexplicable situation developed in North America. Up to the time of the writing of this report 20 years later, and it's more than 20 years later now, no satisfactory explanation has been forthcoming. Beginning in the latter part of June, people in widely separated places and from all walks of life began to report having seen shining, high-speed, strangely maneuvering objects in the sky. In most of these reports, the objects were described as round or disc-shaped. Joining us again, me, second personality, is Dr. Bill. How's it going, Bill?
Hello. And you are Doug.
I am Doug, yes.
I don't know if you introduced yourself.
I didn't. People are asking, who is that?
Yeah. Oh, I'm done. We just spent an hour talking, and now we're recording. Okay.
Yeah, things that people are passing. My dog passed.
Your dog.
One of my dogs passed. One of my good friends' dad's passed, and it's just getting to be that kind of.
Yes.
It's a very uplifting episode.
Very happy week.
Yeah.
So
been a good month. How are you doing? So how's sunny Florida? It's going to be 61 here today.
It is. It was not. It was 45 when I woke up this morning. I'm changing my camera resolution down to odiously bad. Because I think I'm overwhelming my. Oh, I just killed my. Oh, there it goes. So yeah, it was 45. I'm just changing my camera resolution because my computer can't handle the graphics and it's slowing things down.
Can we turn mine on?
No, you're good. Don't worry about yours. I just reduced mine. It's the way it is. I will get a new computer by the time we do a road trip, unless the motorhome has 120 volt, and then we'll just move your computers into it and use that.
Take the whole computer system in there.
Otherwise I'll have a computer that can do all this stuff.
So what's going on?
So nothing much. I did a short or a snippet, which
it's and Deb really likes it. What's in Bill's shorts? That's
that's good. Yes. What topic is Bill's shorts?
Well, Robert, our producer, he says, you can only put it in, YouTube, and I'm putting it in both. I'm putting it in Omni and YouTube because people are listening. So
people are listening.
Thank you for your listening. I know it's a little short, but it's informative. So everybody, make sure you check that out.
Yeah, I don't think it's fantastic, but it's a struggle to come up with ideas and a struggle to talk for 10 minutes. Although there's one of my favorite YouTube channels. I watched this guy had an 8-year anniversary live stream. The guy talked for 3 hours, unscripted. And it was interesting. I was like, holy crap.
What did you think about that?
He's been doing it for a long time. He's been doing it for a long time. He's really good. So it's entertainment stuff. It's TV and entertainment. It's nerdrotic.
Yeah, I tried to. When I first started doing this, before you rolled in, I was going to just do it on my own. That's how I intended on doing it. And Robert said, go ahead and record an hour of just you. And I did, and I sent it in to him, and he goes, did you listen to it? And I said, no. And he goes,
no.
Why don't you go ahead and listen to it? And I listened to it, and boy, did it suck. It was so boring.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he goes, you have to kind of have two people.
Well, this guy's been doing it for a long time, and he did really well. It was a live stream, so it is live streams are interactive because you're responding to the comments and stuff. Yeah. It was good. The guy's been doing it for years. The guy's excellent. It's amazing. It was amazing to watch. So yeah, I'm struggling to develop shorts, and the topic that I did this last time I thought was pretty good because I did the 5 observables that Luis Elizondo came up with, or his group came up with when he was at the Pentagon, and then I made a list of 8 observables for UFOs or UAPs from 1897. And I was thinking I would try and come up with observables for the 1947 stuff, which we were talking about, and maybe we can talk about, those compared to these other two things, because this is not an original idea that I had with me, but I was reading Flying Saucers Serious Business by Frank Edwards, and he laid out the observables for the 1897 UFOs, and then was talking about those compared to the modern sightings, I think in the 60s, 50s, even 1947, and suggested that the UFOs were adapting or evolving to modern aircraft. That's a real interesting idea. So we talked about. Is your mic on? Your mic is not on.
Yeah, mic's on. That is interesting.
So
I muted myself because I had to blow my nose.
Yes.
I didn't know that it stayed muted. I got to get used to this technology. I figured I had to hold it. And it's just like yours. I thought I had to hold the button.
No, mine's exactly the same microphone.
So you just hit the button.
I hit the button. It turns. You have a light. You should have a light.
Yeah, and it blinks when it's muted. So it's.
Yeah, mine turns red.
Ongoing use to the tech.
Ongoing use to the tech. I did get a new camera body for our up-and-coming future road trip through UFO territory in the West. We'll see how that works out. I'm going to buy another lens today.
Is it a regular camera?
It's a DSLR, Canon? But it's a full HD video camera considered to be. So they're not.
Oh wow!
It's older tech, but it looks pretty slick. It's slicker than my technological skill level, as we all know from this. Well,
you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, we're doing pretty good as long as I can refit the old equipment, which. But then I still need to get a new computer this year. But this stuff's working great. So 1947, we talked about it a few episodes ago, which is probably about a month ago, I think.
Yep.
And 1947 is interesting because there were no attitudes. And we're working from a report that was put out in 1967 called The Report on the UFO Wave by Ted Blocker, with an introduction by James E. McDonald, 1967. And it's got a note that it was revised, updated version 2005, but I don't know it, by NICAP, which technically doesn't really exist in 2005, but I'm not sure how that works. So the interesting part of the 1947 UFO report is all these sightings, all these events that people were reporting were before there was UFOs had entered the national consciousness or the worldwide consciousness. So there were no attitudes about UFOs, no preconceptions, no misconceptions, no policies by either press or public or by any official agencies. And certainly no pattern existed concerning the phenomenon by which comparisons might be made. Let's see, also says, we know that after 1947, a UFO witness might be afraid to report a sighting publicly for fear of ensuing ridicule and intimidation. And I've been reading through some of these reports, and they broke them down to different sort of categories of observations, also with locations and things like that. And I've been seeing a few things. Some of these reports are real interesting. So I've been seeing different things. People were seeing a lot of flying saucers. When we think of flying saucers, we think of them as being flying flat. But people reporting seeing them flipped up on their sides and moving like wheels through the...
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's real interesting. So, like I said, I did the thing with the 5 observables for 1897, and I want to do observables from this stuff and compare it to that and the current observables, which are pretty wild. But there was a couple things. You saw we were talking about that video about the which was on YouTube about, I don't remember the site, but it was about the S4 location on Google Maps. Did you look at that? Did you find that?
I didn't find. I mean, I tried Google. I did try getting into Google Maps, and I can't magnify it. I mean, I'm sure if I did it differently enough to where it showed a label of S4. I'm sure it's not really labeled. Did you do it? Because I couldn't get it to find it. I found some roads in a facility that looked in that area. I mean, I think it's not labeled S4 though, like it did in that video.
I think they were using Google Earth.
They did that. Yeah, what did I say? Google Maps. So Google Earth is what I was using.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, and one of the things I was wondering is a lot of times on these maps, people can, like, I don't know if it's Google Earth, but on Google Maps, you can add in, people can add
label.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's an actual geographic label or people have added that label in. But yeah, that video was, it sucks you in with the S4 thing. And then they start talking about some sort of weird structure and they were calling it a Stargate. And just jumping from person to person, it was like saying the same thing over and over again. And then I sat there and I watched the whole thing for 40 minutes. And it's just like, they didn't say anything. And it's basically, you look on Google Maps, there's a site that says S4. And they're saying that validates, oh God, what's the guy's name? Lazar. God.
Yeah, corroborates his story. And I know I'm still jury's out with me with. I agree. Well, we've talked about it 100 times.
Yeah.
I think he did something there. I don't know what he really.
There is, like I said, we've talked about it a bunch of times. There is something to his story. There is some truth to his story. We don't know. I mean, we are taking the viewpoint that everything with a grain of salt. I like the philosophy of believing people until you find out otherwise. So technically, I think he's worth listening to. But I don't say he's not telling the truth or he didn't see these things. I'm holding my opinion in reserve until I get more information. I mean, that's all you can do. I mean, what do you do? It's like, it's a little different with flat Earth. I saw that the YouTube video when you're talking about flat Earth, they put the label on it like, oh, we better put this label on it, make sure that people can determine that the Earth isn't really flat. So it's like, oh God.
Yeah, I don't really.
I know. It's just like it's like these. I don't know what these tech companies or the media just think that the average person is just so dumb, and they're not. And that's just wrong. And then I noticed the thing that was talking about S4 on Google Earth and the Stargate structure, which they talked about for like 30 minutes, and I watched it, and then they'd show like a new person and a new hip young person talking about this potential Stargate, and it's like, I don't know what that is. And they had a label of Area 51 that went to some article, maybe Wikipedia or something. I go, what's the purpose of that?
Yeah, I only watched it to the point where it had the label of S4 and I got excited about it. I'm like, oh, can we do that?
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it. It was there. I could find the similar roads into a similar facility that was separated away from the main base. But
and I've looked at that stuff. I've looked at the maps and stuff, and I mean, it is what it is. So, but I like the label on there that goes to Wikipedia. And Wikipedia is a good source for a lot of things, but Wikipedia is also something that is not necessarily a reliable source of information of anything.
Anybody can edit that, or how's that work?
Anybody can edit it, but the editors are pretty, you have like, so I've written a couple articles and edited articles in Wikipedia. And I've written two, I've edited two. There was two articles. Oh, and then I tried to create another article, and they wouldn't let me do it because Wikipedia decides almost, I don't know how they do it. They pick certain news sources and say they're not reliable news sources, and you can't use them as references.
Wow.
And that is, it's almost an arbitrary. It's like whoever gets a wild hair up their butt and decides that they don't want to allow something. But I was editing one article which had absolutely false medical information in it. And
oh, really?
Yeah. And I had to struggle. I had to fight these editors to allow me to change this information, which was just literally absolutely false with no validation other than a quote in a newspaper article. There was no scientific articles on it. There was no medical evidence for this observation, and it was an extremely frustrating experience, because it's like this was something that was just absolutely wrong and harmful, and the editors fought me on changing it. And I had to I go, there's no article. I had to go through the whole litany, and after that I said, it's not worth my time to fight idiots on Wikipedia to fix stuff. So yeah. After that, I mean, Wikipedia is it is what it is. If there's enough,
I use it as a reference.
I do too.
Other references. It's good for that.
I use it as a starting place.
Yeah.
So exactly. Wikipedia is a great starting place to go in there to look at the information, but check the references, and think about what you're reading and judge it against your own sort of experiences and decide whether or not what you're reading, especially anything that's dodgy or political. And formulate your own opinion. Now, the things that are really good on Wikipedia are like physics, mathematical articles. Those are very good. A lot of the science stuff is very good. But like I said, I really had a hard time getting the editors who were fighting me on this article to change literally 2 sentences with very misleading information.
Well,
medically dangerous information, but hey, that was me. That's my last time I ever tried to do good deeds on Wikipedia. Let other people fight those fights. My ass is too tired to do that stuff anymore. So, but 1947, the sightings are real interesting because of at this point, other than going back to the newspaper articles from 1897, which was a whole nother sort of experience, and that's interesting, is these things are new, and new in 1947. So a lot of the information has been, you got to sort of filter it because it's a newspaper articles, but some of the things were followed up by Dr. McDonald, who was a genuine scientist who was interested in researching UFO sightings as a real phenomenon that needed to be investigated rigorously. So some of these reports, he actually came back 20 years later and found the people that were written about in the newspaper articles and interviewed them to correct the newspaper articles, or to not correct it, but to interview them, correct the article, and validate what they saw, and what was printed.
Did you see the portion of that in there where the Chronicle in June 27th of 47 printed an opinion by Captain Al Smith, the United Airlines pilot, who stated that he felt that the Kenneth Arnold sighting was actually reflections off an instrument panel. Which I realize the ramifications of that sighting not being real.
Well, there's going through this, I've been highlighting and marking up my paper copy of this article, which is, I don't know how many pages. It's probably a couple of hundred pages of this report. And there was another sighting about the same time as Arnold saw it, in Idaho, which isn't by air, it's not that far from where he saw these things. And it was similar to what he saw. So I can't say. So I saw that. I just read that this morning. That's a possibility, and that's something that a lot of pilots were aware of. I don't know if Arnold was aware of that sort of thing, but later on, when we were reading stuff about pilots in the 50s, pilots would do a lot of maneuvers to try to change the reflections in their canopies or their windows to determine whether or not they changed the attitude of the plane, because obviously the reflections would change to make sure that they weren't seeing a reflection on the windows. So I don't think that that's a sort of mistake. Didn't Arnold actually open the window? He had some of these older planes had like little wing windows and stuff. He might have actually, I think he did stuff to verify that it was not a reflection. And a lot of people in this report too, they have a few examples. This is the beginning of people just throwing stuff out. Oh, they were seeing that. Oh, they were seeing this. I mean, I have 2 or 3 books that we'll get to in some point out of my library of older UFO books. This is before people were really slammed for seeing weird things. So Kenneth Arnold, Mazel, who was the Harvard astronomer, head of the Department of Astronomy, he said that Arnold probably saw atmospheric distortions. And he does some pseudo experiments in his lab to show, with water and different fluids and stuff, to show how this can occur. I don't think Arnold was seeing reflections in his. I don't think he's that dumb. Basically, he's not that dumb, and that's sort of a ridiculous thing. There was a report in this thing where a psychiatrist was interviewed. Actually, I have it right in front of me. Here and there, an occasional voice of some reason was heard in Syracuse, New York. Dr. H.A. Steckel, psychiatric consultant for the Veterans Administration, said, "They have been seen by too many people," they is referring to the UFOs, "in too many different places to be dismissed so lightly. He was persuaded that they could be the results of experiments by some unknown government agencies." And I think that's a valid point. It's like there's so many, especially in this report for 1947. And we will cover some of this, but I mean, there's so many reports, so many people, so many places. Is it like in the news we have now? Is it mass hysteria? Are people just going outside and hallucinating? I don't think that happens. So
that would be something pretty strange to see. I mean, there was another report where, not another report, but another opinion where they thought that it might have been it was because they were flying in formation like that. They were actually jet aircraft. Now, I don't know, when was the first jet aircraft?
1947. Oh, crap.
So they were saying that,
no, I don't know when the first jet aircraft were. They had jet aircraft.
They have jet.
I'm trying to think. I'd have to dig through this stuff.
I'll just look it up.
Yeah, look it up.
Well, the Germans had it in, holy shit, they had it in 1939. They had the Heinkel HE-178.
Yeah. Oh, that was that one might have been sort of like rocket propelled. So that wasn't an air breather. That was just a limited.
42, the British had the Gloucester Meteor. That was in 42.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
there were jet aircraft, and there was 47. I don't know. They had I can't remember the designation, but I have a really nice article on it in one of these old True magazines, the night fighters with the radars. And I got my 19. What year is this? I have my 1950 aircraft recognition guide for the ground observer.
The Americans seem to be behind on, published jet aircraft behind other countries. It's interesting.
Let's see. My identification manual is for 1955 for aircraft. There's a ton of jet aircraft in here.
It's 1944, the Me-262. We're familiar with the German fighter that they designed. I mean, 1930, that's 1944.
Yeah.
It's into the war. So, the possibility exists that, the U.S. could have been testing jet aircraft, but that's that's not a test. He had a half a dozen that he saw, I believe, that were not full. They were not, if they had swept wings and maybe who knows.
Well, you do have some, if you do look at an aircraft from the side, it can look like a saucer. And I saw that when I was driving past the local airport. On the highway here, there was a plane was taxiing for takeoff, and it just rotated to the runway to take off. And as it was rotating, a certain angle looked just like a flying saucer. It had that shape. And I can look at, in my aircraft recognition guide for the ground observer, when they had the recognition corps this is from 1955. A Vickers Valiant has a nice sort of, if you saw that from the side and you didn't pick up on the tail, you might think that was a saucer. The X-93 high-speed penetration fighter development for the F-86. A lot of these planes, you can be misled by that. Plus, if a plane is far enough away, you're just going to get a reflection off the fuselage, especially an aluminum body that's not painted. And you might think that's a saucer. And looking at some of the reports in this, in the 1947 report, there are a few descriptions that I would say were potentially a fighter wing flying in V formation, and some of the stuff I would say is probably meteorite, but there's others that are just definitely not, not a plane, obviously a plane or a meteorite.
Right.
So, one of the things that I saw in this, we talked about the Maury Island mystery, which is a hoax or not a hoax, but it's got some very strange elements around it. At the same time, a few days later, there was lots of sightings of UFOs over Portland, Oregon. So it's not just and this is 1947, so it's not just, when we look at a lot of the documentaries on YouTube or on the History Channel or something like that, the people that produce these documentaries don't seem to do a lot of research. We've been doing this for 8 months or something like that, and I put a library together, and we've been jumping around and looking at different books and different aspects, but starting at the beginning, or trying to. And I saw a documentary about the Maury Island mystery and been reading stuff about it. And the stuff you read about it, it's in isolation. So you look at it and you think no one else is seeing UFOs at this time, except maybe Arnold, who was investigating the Maury Island thing. But that's not true. This report says there were 850 at least published reports of UFO sightings during this time.
Yeah, phenomenally high for that time.
Yeah, and the beginning of July there were hundreds of sightings, and these are just these are newspapers all over the country. One of the things that I was thinking when I was reading this thing, this was when this stuff was happening in 1947. They started, was it Project Sign or Project Saucer is what they called it, with in not Ruppelt's books, but Kehoe's books. And the people that wrote the report for Project Sign, when they sent it up to the Pentagon, they were saying, they said, we think there's a possibility that this might be extraterrestrial. And part of the reason that they were thinking that was because of, at the time, people didn't know that Venus and Mars were uninhabitable or uninhabited. So it's like, okay, we might be having visitors from the other potentially habitable planets in our solar system. And of course, the Vandenberg shot it down. And I was like, well, that's a stretch to, here you are, a professional in the Air Force. And I hate to say it, but I think they're probably more professional back then than they are now. And, that's not true. I mean, that can't be true. But they sent this report up to the Pentagon, and they seriously considered this idea. But the big compelling reason that they were thinking that this was a reasonable statement to send up to the chief of the Air Corps was the huge number of sightings, hundreds of good sightings. So that for them it was perfect. They're like, something serious is going on. We don't have an explanation for it. It's got to be aliens. It's aliens. People from Mars, people from Venus are finally visiting us, telling us, checking us out.
Well, the statement that they made, it can't be from, I don't know if they said it could be from Venus or it couldn't be from Venus or Mars because it's not habitable as far as we can tell.
At that time, it wasn't known, though. We didn't have enough information to, I can't remember when the first probes went to Venus, early 60s maybe.
The things that I see, even recently, I've heard statements made by scientists on, I watch Ancient Aliens almost every other day. And
I need to check.
It's really informative. It's really informative because they don't just do Ancient Aliens; they do a lot of different things.
And they're doing good. They're doing good.
They do
research.
a good job.
Okay.
Yeah, they do a good job.
I'll check it out.
To say that because it's hostile environment on Venus, they didn't. Entities there may have evolved differently on Venus, as you know, than they would have on Earth. I mean, we're just assuming because we don't see. It's got a different kind of atmosphere. It's I don't know if it's this one's chlorine or whatever.
It's mostly carbon dioxide with. They say that it has sulfuric acid rain. Yeah, but there's also go on.
To say that nothing can live there is probably true, but maybe not. I mean, they could have evolved.
You're absolutely right. You should not make that assumption until it's actually been explored. And,
I never like hearing that. Nobody can live there because any Earther can't live there. Well,
yeah. There was a science fiction story or book that I read a long time ago. I don't remember the title or the author, but what I remember about the book was it was like astronauts were coming to Earth from a really hot planet like Venus, and they were I don't even remember a lot of the details, but I remember like the astronaut coming into the atmosphere and like getting out of his ship in his space suit to explore, and his suit was freezing up, and it was like his suit was designed for I don't know what, but he came from a planet like Venus where it was like insanely hot, and he's coming to Earth, and this was like they were considering Earth to be like almost like an ice ball. And I just remember the guy getting out, and he's having this. They're trying to explore and do something, and he's starting to have suit failure, so he's got to like get back. And part of the thing was they were trying to improve their suits so that they could land on Earth and explore. And he's out there, and his suit's starting going through failure, and it's like the third or fourth iteration of his suit, and he's got to get back to his ship, and it's a big struggle, and so it's always a possibility.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. It could be but who knows? It's pretty nasty there.
Yeah,
but nasty for us, maybe not for.
Well, our I think at the time when that book was written, there are limitations to what life can survive, but recently they just say they discovered a huge breeding grounds for ice fish in Antarctica, and these are fish that live in water that's like 32 degrees.
Yeah,
and they're perfectly happy. And then you have they discovered, people were surprised to discover in the hot springs in Yosemite that there's bacteria and algae that thrive in those temperatures. So we don't really know what the absolute limits range for life is. So yeah,
you're a scientist. I can ask you this. We send these remotely operated vehicles deep into the ocean, and we go down there in suits and we get crushed, because of the depth. How do these fragile fish and things, how do they survive in that tough. Crushing depth?
They're tough. They're tough. No. I don't get that. You've done scuba diving, so you go down.
Yeah.
I mean, why aren't you? The thing is that you equalize. So when you go diving, the deeper you go, the less air your tank will have. So I've done 100. I think I did a 110-foot dive. I literally at 33 feet, 10 meters, which I think is 1 atmosphere. So you're essentially at 2 atmospheres. Your standard tank, the tank that I used to have when I scuba dived, I had enough air for 1 hour. When I went down to 110 feet, I had enough air for 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's 10 minutes at over 100 feet.
Yeah, so I had 10 minutes. Now, that's at, what is that? It's 33, it's just 2 atmospheres, 3 atmospheres, 4 atmospheres. So I'm at 4 atmospheres. Technically, I should have 15 minutes of air, but that makes sense. You have 10 minutes on the bottom, and then you have to come up with decompression stops. So you're at 5 atmospheres. You don't feel it because you equilibrate. So the problem is if you want to stay at 1 atmosphere and you go underwater, that's where you have the crushing problems. The saturation divers, when they go down to, I don't even know what they do. These people do like technical diving. And it's a wild sport. And they will do incredibly deep dives using unusual gas mixtures and stuff.
Right.
And I don't even know what the record is anymore. It could be, I used to follow that. I don't anymore. Maybe 300 feet. I don't know. Some insane depths. And construction workers.
Kind of talking about like, when you're in a submarine, and they go into, I don't know what their depth can be now. It's extreme, I'm sure. But they hear the metal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're at the chamber, the submarine's at 1 atmosphere. So you're going, so the water pressure is pushing on the outside of the submarine. It's trying to compress it. So
it's just weird because they pressurize that to counteract that, I assume.
Well, so it's not pressurizing it. The structure is built to withstand it. Yeah. So, but when you go to 100 feet as a diver, you're at 5 atmospheres. You don't even feel it because you equilibrate.
Yeah.
So
then you got a fish or an octopus in thousands of feet of water.
Yeah, they don't care.
Affected by
they don't care. And apparently this Antarctic water is this was interesting. This was wild. I just read this on this article. These ice fish in Antarctica don't have hemoglobin in their blood. So our blood cells have hemoglobin in it, and the hemoglobin carries oxygen to our cells and does the exchange for carbon dioxide and oxygen. These fish don't need hemoglobin in their blood because this cold Arctic water is so saturated with oxygen. They just don't need it. So that's wild. They
absorb it directly from the water.
I guess, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I guess. Huh. I don't know what the mechanism is, but they don't have hemoglobin. So that's so I love exploring reading about these creatures in extreme environments. It's just absolutely wonderful and wild.
They call them extremophobes or something like that.
Yeah.
Like they live in these volcanic vents underneath the water.
That's an
hot
absolute
water.
Because those creatures are actually using a different metabolic pathway than was traditionally known. And that is really cool stuff. So our understanding of the limits and extremes that life can survive at are, we don't know what our parameters are. We know we have observed it can be pretty extreme. I think the temperature of the surface of Venus is probably outside of that range, but we don't know the absolute limit of that range.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I saw, I haven't watched it yet, is Chris Lato, who has a really good, I don't know if you've checked out his stuff, but it has an hour and a half interview with Elizabeth Keene, who wrote a book on UFOs, and she's also doing life after death stuff, I think.
Oh, really?
But she wrote I actually have a copy of her book. Yeah, UFOs by Leslie Keene, where she went and interviewed a bunch of military people about their UFO observations and experience. Haven't read it yet because I have too many books to read, and we're working from the 50s to 40s and whatever forward.
Yeah.
So, what else before we dive back into the 1947 report? Anything exciting?
Nothing further exciting has happened since the last week in UFO land.
Oh,
Yep.
So no, I looked into the MUFON site, and their database is really hard to search. So I will.
Well, you go into journals, and then, when I first joined a year ago, it showed in fact, we did an episode pretty dry because we're just reading the different sightings.
Yeah,
and they're really not very, even if you could see the picture is not very compelling, but like we discussed last week, some of the sightings were under 100 feet. Nobody has a camera. And landed on the ground.
Everybody has a camera now.
And nobody had a camera. I mean, these aren't old sightings; these are new. Yeah, and then everybody, it's under 100 feet. You saw this thing, and there's either the picture is horrible, as they almost always are, or there's no picture at all.
Yeah.
So,
well, we've talked about this, and we've been exploring the limits of photography. And I talked about it. Just go out there and try and take a picture of an airplane.
Yeah.
And I haven't even seen any. I hear helicopters every once in a while. And the best picture I was able to get was a helicopter. And then I did a measurement with a ruler of its size at arm length, and then did a quick calculation I know the size of the helicopter, and did a calculation of its altitude, which came out to be 1,000 feet. I thought it would have been, if I just looked at it and saw it circling around, I said, oh, that helicopter's at 500 feet.
Yeah.
So, but it was at least 1,000 feet, but I knew approximately how big the helicopter was, so I could calculate its size. But that came out with a decent picture from my phone. I just took a picture of my phone. It was okay. But go out beyond 2,000-3,000 feet, any sort of craft, your picture's not going to be very good. So even modern cameras, although they're getting better and better and better, still, like I said, play with. If you're out and you see a plane, take a picture.
Yeah, I did the air show. Those clips but they're flying. They flew over,
but they were really low. They're air show height.
Yeah. Yeah, it's over the house. So it's not too low, because they turn it. We have a turning point where here in Sacramento, when they turn here, probably 1,000. They might be, like you said. I think 1,000 feet, but it's probably something completely different.
But your poor dog's having a heart attack.
No, my dog went and hid in the bathroom.
Oh,
yeah, and now every time a commercial airliner comes over, he freaks out. So hopefully he'll get over that. Shepherds aren't as brave as they used to be.
It might be the engine whine. They might have a hypersonic whine that's really piercing.
Yeah.
If they're low enough, and that might be why he's freaked out, because it's just killing his ears.
It's probably because, my wife has that thing where if he starts barking, it doesn't shock him. It's a sound. And Yeah, we can't hear. So, you're right. It might be something like that.
I have a feeling it's because the jet engines, I'm sure, are cranking out some hypersonic stuff, and it's probably that's what's driving him nuts, because it probably just hurts it probably is so bad it hurts his teeth.
Yeah.
But so this report from 1947, they broke down a lot of these sightings to a different type of observations, and I will go through them. They do loose formations, straight line formations, V and triangular formations, and looking at that one, I think some of those that people saw might have been fighter jet. I don't know what you call it, a fighter jet wing flying over at a great distance. They have hovering objects. They have abrupt changes in elevation, circling maneuvers. Some of the circling maneuvers people were talking about. They look like birds. And remember that video? I can't remember the name of it, but we've looked at it numerous times from the 50s, where that guy, which guy? It was the guy that was a photographer for, I think, the Air Force. He pulled over and he took pictures of these, what he described as flying saucers doing these weird maneuvers. And it's supposed to be in color, but I don't know if the color version of the film survives. And people have said it looks like birds flying around. So one of the reports described it as these movements that look like birds, but people were sure they were not birds, that they were saucer-shaped craft. They got circling maneuvers. They got sudden stops and reversal of flight. They got various and general movements. They got low swooping and car buzzing reports. I want one of those.
Oh, yeah, that'd be cool.
They got landings and takeoffs. There's some interesting ones there. And then that's as far as I've been able to read. But they also have appendages with describing antennas, legs, propellers, or tails. There was a description of one craft, wasn't in the domes, fins, or knobs. One craft where somebody said they saw it turn and take off, and said they saw fins pop up on the back. And then small objects, torpedo or cylindrical objects, which comes back to the 1947 sightings of like dirigible type craft, cone-shaped objects, propeller-shaped objects, V or winged-shaped objects, and satellite object reports. And then the next section is they do a breakdown of the witnesses, like businesses, educator, meteorologist, army, people, Navy, newsmen, doctors, and then empirical evidence, which we will get to.
Now, real quick, I feel the same way, honestly, about flying saucers that fly in formation as I feel about flying saucers with lights. I don't really feel like they need to fly in formation. I would be more likely to believe flying saucers in just a wad or random group rather than in a formation like jets we do with our fighter jets. They don't need to. I wouldn't think. I shouldn't say they don't, because I don't know. But I wouldn't think they need to do that. I wouldn't think that they need lights so that things won't run into them or them running into others.
One of the things so looking at these case reports from 1947, there's only a few where I think people were seeing that they had lights. Mostly people are describing it as reflections or like shiny aluminum type skin. But in the 1947s, in the 1897 sightings, one of the characteristics or one of the observables for those ships was some sort of brilliant spotlight which could be shined on an area or on individuals. And that in 1897, that was an extremely unusual occurrence. Although there were arc lights, they did have electricity, they did have arc lights which would produce great shining lights. And I think that's what people assumed, is that even though dirigibles weren't in production and weren't known to be functional at this level for a decade or more, people assumed it was just a dirigible with arc lights. People were generating, electricity on these things and using arc lights to shine and look at things. But there was
that's one of the things where if they're taking cattle and people. I mean, the one thing is there's a beam that they come. I think there's a beam, and then the one cattle thing where we talked about. I believe we talked about where it had a cable that came out of this.
Yeah, that was one of my.
And grabbed the cow.
I talked about it. And I read the original report in my previous.
That was good.
That was great.
That was good.
So, but
and then they found the cow hide and things, and then a few farms away. Yeah, and that was a great story.
I found a cow. Is this yours?
Yeah, that's as believable of an UFO experience as you get, I think.
Yeah, and the one that that was in Frank Edwards' book, Flying Saucers: Serious Business. They even had an affidavit from people, friends and stuff, stating that this guy that he was considered to be a truthful person.
Maybe they're eating. Maybe they eat them. They're not like, maybe they cut the butthole out, and that's just the delicacy for them.
That's that's the cattle mutilation stuff. Yeah. Although there was the that UFO show, was it that Abrams did, where they interviewed the guy.
Showtime.
They interviewed the guy in Australia where he's having cattle mutilations on his thing, and that was a big deal around here for a while in the U.S. until, I don't know, in the 70s or 80s. But there was a lot of weird crap going on in like the 70s that sort of bled into the 80s, and you don't know.
Chemical. I think we were experimenting. We were doing a lot because we didn't know what we know now about things getting out of control.
Well, they did have those accidental gassings. Actually, I spent some time at Dugway, Utah, where they were doing chemical tests. I can't remember which gas they were using. Might have been using anthrax. I don't know. And the wind shifted and it carried it off to neighboring ranch land and killed a bunch of sheep.
Yeah.
So and that's been well documented, and there's been movies made about it and documentaries and stuff like that. And that was
they experiment on them. I guess they can't take. I don't know why they can't just take the whole. It's like they leave the thing with like missing eyes and sliced open. Yeah. And it's like do they have to leave would they really leave that evidence?
Yeah.
Like, you take the whole thing and you dispose of it.
Well, it's interesting.
Just leave it laying in the.
Yeah. Well, the thing is too is that was heavily investigated by the FBI and stuff. So and nothing's come from that. Yeah. So I don't know what's going on. You go back to Skinwalker Ranch, where they've had some cattle mutilation. I don't think it's interdimensional space aliens that are mutilating the cattle. I think it's angry neighbors, because this is a
range war.
Yeah, it's cowboys versus Indians, and historically in that area, the state government was taking land from reservation land legally under their laws from the tribal lands, and there's a lot of animosity still in that area. So let's go over. I know case reports are not that interesting, but let's take a look at.
And I've joined the MUFON Rockland group in Facebook as the Alien Pro Podcast Facebook. So we'll see. They haven't thrown me out yet, but I'm waiting for a meeting. I would like to join their group and be involved in the Zoom or Teams or whatever they use, which I can do whichever they do. And I'd like to join them and then kind of report back and, with their approval, be able to air some of the things that are discussed with MUFON. And I think MUFON's a great organization. Well, it seems to be a great organization.
They're doing a investigator training class coming up. I saw in one of their journals in Tennessee.
Yeah,
Tennessee.
I may eventually do that. I mean, it'd be interesting to be able to be one of those people. But it's I find it. I would like to, be involved with the organization at some level. I don't know. It seems like Rockland's not too far from where we are.
Well, I looked into that class, because I saw the ad for it. The price isn't crazy, and I think it's a week.
They're reasonable.
Yeah, it's very reasonable. It's very reasonable. It might be. I was thinking maybe it might be a fun week.
I mean, you have to actually go there. It's not an online thing.
No, you go there and they you sit in a classroom, probably in a hotel or something. I've done stuff like this before. I'm sure it's a lot more interesting than other stuff I've had to sit through.
Well, now MUFON's with your Harvard, the new what's the name?
Galileo project.
Galileo with Elizondo. Now, I think MUFON's joining together with them.
Really? You saw
on
something?
This thing? Yeah, I'll have to.
Well, I'm not sure that they are, because I was going through their ground rules. Now they've changed those. I tried to go back and look what they originally had, and what they originally had on Project Galileo was a thing about not. What was it? They were not going to consider stuff that fell outside of the realms of physics, known physics.
Okay.
And I have that here. This is their Project Galileo ground rules. Number 2, the analysis of data will be based solely on known physics and will not entertain fringe ideas about the extension of the standard model of physics. The research efforts will always remain in the realm of scientific hypothesis, tested through rigorous data collection and sound analysis. Now, the only problem I have with that is that if you take in, and I talked about this in my snippet, if you take into consideration the 5 observables, first observable is positive lift or anti-gravity, the ability to fly without apparent means of propulsion or lift, and that's a direct violation of known physics. Instantaneous acceleration, ability of a craft to reach a high rate of speed in a short amount of time. That could be an issue with the basic model of physics. Hypersonic velocity, that's the 3rd observable, a craft's ability to reach speeds over 3,700 miles per hour, or Mach 5. And without a lot of these observations of hypersonic velocity are without a sonic boom, which is considered outside of the realm of physics. And Project Galileo, when they first opened up their webpage, they actually had a statement in there said that they would not consider stuff like this. So I don't know what has changed. But they are determined. Galileo's determined to use, and they're smart about this, to use data that they gather with their instruments.
Right.
So, but I had this interesting idea. It's like, what if they have their instruments set up, and they make these observations, and they get really good pictures, and they see something moving, doing all these different things, except maybe transmedium travel, and their observations violate the known laws of physics. What do you do then?
Right.
So, but that's how science is done. You have a blue glow. What are you looking up? Are you on your computer?
I'm setting up our ending here, sir.
You're ending us? You're setting us up?
Our narrative setting us, not the ending, but our episode ending.
You're setting it up.
Well, I have to read it. I don't know it by heart.
Oh, yeah, I know. The thing that you always say. Oh, did you want to do an ad? We forgot to do an ad.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do the ad.
Can you do the ad at the end? You do the ad at the end?
Yeah,
do it at the end.
Maybe you can put it in the beginning.
I'm going to leave it at the end.
At Orion BCS, their goal is to find the best program and rates available for your business. Their team has years of experience helping clients find lower rates for processing credit cards. They understand that every business is different, so let them open and spend the time to find out what suits your business needs. So visit orionbcs.com and let them begin the process towards saving you money to help you realize your financial goals. Once again, visit orionbcs.com and contact them today. All programs of Orion BCS are subject to terms and conditions. Visit orionbcs.com for more details. There you have it.
Hey, I'm at an hour I think next time what we will do is we will let's go into the different reports under different categories for the report in 1947.
Okay.
And I know it's boring to read case reports, but I think we should look at these and talk about what people are seeing. I think we'll try and make it interesting.
Okay. So, yeah. That sounds good.
There's some cool sightings in here, and like I said, these are sightings before people even knew what flying saucers were.
We'll pick out some. We'll find some.
We'll find some
juicy ones. Some juicy ones.
Yes. So other than that,
cool. Ready to wrap it up?
Yeah, let's wrap it up. We've been on talking for hours, so I'm ready to wrap it up.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Alien Probe Podcast. We welcome comments and questions or requests to alienprobepodcast@gmail.com. Visit us on Facebook at alienprobe.net, Twitter and Instagram at alienprobepod, YouTube, thank you, at Alien Probe Podcast. Thanks to our senior producer, Robert Anthony. Dr. Bill, thanks for joining again.
All right, thank you.
Certainly appreciate it.
We'll see
you next time.
Next time. Bye-bye.